So welcome to the Dialogues from Facebook, and we are joined by Prime Minister Tony Blair for a quick chat on what's happening in Europe and Britain. Prime Minister Blair, thank you for joining us, and we are delighted to have you at the Raisina Dialogue.
I'm very pleased to be here.
I'm going to ask you the question everyone would have asked you already in Delhi, but differently. Is Britain facing its biggest challenge since World War II? And are we seeing grown-ups trying to respond to this challenge?
The answer is yes. I think it is the biggest challenge the country's faced since the Second World War, because it's going to decide our future as a country. And I think people are responding to it in a grown-up way, but it's very difficult because the problem is we have been 4.5 decades inside Europe. Around 60% of our trade is governed by our economic relationships in Europe. And therefore our choice is a very difficult one, because we either stay close to Europe and abide by Europe's rules to get access to Europe's markets, in which case Brexit becomes rather pointless because people want Brexit to break away from these rules. Or alternatively, we do break away, in which case it's going to be painful. And that is the essential dilemma that's been at the heart of the negotiation. And the government has tried to find a way through it, and I think it's proven very, very difficult for obvious reasons, because of the length of time we've been in the European Union.
Is the European Union negotiating in terms of the deal that it's offered on the table? Is it brinksmanship? Do you think the European Union is playing hardball, or do you think they're also being a little careless or a little insensitive in trying to respond to the British sensitivities?
Right, so there's a perception quite widespread in parts of the UK that Europe is being very difficult with us, very unreasonable. Actually, Europe, from the very beginning, this has not really been a negotiation alone. It's mainly a choice. So Europe is prepared to negotiate something that keeps us very close to Europe. So we become a country like Norway. We're still in the Europe single market. But the problem with that is you become a rule taker from Europe, but not a rule maker. So that's not appealing. But that's what I call the pointless Brexit. Europe's also prepared to offer us a third country type of deal, like the deal Europe's just concluded with Canada. Okay. But that's painful because it means there won't be tariff barriers necessary, but there will be trade friction. Okay. So Europe is prepared to offer us either of those two things, or probably something in between. What we've been trying to negotiate, which has been unnegotiable, is to keep our access free and full to Europe's markets, whilst not keeping to the rules or making our own rules. This is never going to work. So in a way, it's not that Europe's been playing hardball with us or it's been brinkmanship. It's been that we in the UK have got to make a choice as to whether we want this pointless Brexit or this painful one, which is the real Brexit that people like Boris Johnson was at your conference a couple of years ago. That's what people like him would want. Or like people like me would say, no, this is so complicated, it's become so difficult, it's such a mess, we should go back to the people and ask them whether they want to proceed. And obviously I would like to see Britain change on Brexit, because I think Brexit is a serious mistake for my country.
So a second referendum, if you will. You've been a leader of one of the most vibrant democracies. You see debates on television. People have shaped their entire political evolution based on what happened on television, what we saw on television. Do you think referendums are good? Do you think are they good for democracy? Is leadership shirking responsibility when you go back to people to make the decisions you have been elected to make?
Yeah, no, it's a very good question, and my short answer is no. On the whole, referendums are a bad idea. Governments should govern. I think I did hold referendums on constitutional change. I think, for example, if Britain, not that this is likely to happen, if Britain wanted to join the single currency as a major constitutional change, you could put that to a referendum. I think referendums on the whole are not good ideas, but Britain having decided to leave by referendum, I think it can really only change that choice by referendum.
Using the same tool?
I think so.
Let me ask you a broader question now. I think whether it's Brexit, whether it's the backlash in Europe against immigration or migrants, whether it's the rise of the right politics generally, which is secular. You see it in Americas, you see it in Europe, you see it in Asia. The populist leaders, the strong men and women who are now running much of affairs. Do you think the Atlantic order got it wrong somewhere? And you were a big votary, right? You believed in that order. You were one of the let me say, one of the brands of that order
Yeah.
that I grew up watching. Did we go wrong somewhere when we were implementing the ideals of that order? Do you think that order can still be served and preserved, or do you think it's time for a new deal? And I'm using that old word, the New Deal.
Look, I think the basic principles and values of the Western alliance remain completely valid. You know, we're democracies. This is one of the reasons why we all have such regard and close affiliation for India. We're democracies. We have the rule of law. We have freedom of speech. We have freedom of assembly. These are precious things. And these are things that bind our countries together because they're not just about interests, they're about values. So my response to the populism is a much more simple one. My view is this populism has come about for two reasons. One, there are real anxieties that we have to deal with. Mm-hmm. There are real worries in Europe about immigration. You've got to deal with them.
Correct.
You can't just say, oh no, you shouldn't raise these concerns, or it's racist to raise these concerns. No, there are real worries. There's genuine worries in the UK, for example, about the integration of the Muslim population.
Correct.
Right. You've got to deal with those issues. You can't just pretend they don't exist. So that's the first thing. And people who feel casualties of globalization, who look at all this change and say, feel left out, you've got to deal with them. And the second thing is, people want, it's a paradox in politics today. Through social media, people voice their opinions more than ever before. Mm-hmm. They critique and criticize more than ever before. Mm-hmm. So politicians are getting battered this way and that way by waves of social media anxiety about this, that. The paradox is, at the same time that politicians are subject to all those pressures, curiously, people want strong and effective leaders. So the leader that looks strong and capable and in a way is prepared to stand out against all these pressures is also attractive. But these are the two elements, to my view, and you know, you can have strong leadership that's still true to its values, and that's what we need.
And the Atlantic Order.
And the Atlantic Order remains valid because in the end, look, we're all going to be dealing with the rise of China. You're going to be dealing with it. We're going to be dealing with it. It's the biggest geopolitical fact of my children's lifetime. By the middle of this century, there's going to be America and there's going to be China. And hopefully, and probably, there's going to be India too. And there would be Europe if Europe stays together and remains strong.
It'll be the fourth.
Yeah. So this is the way the world's changing. And that is going to be a battle partly about interests, of course, mm-hmm. but it also could be a battle about values because the Chinese system's a different system. And the Chinese leadership today, although I'm a supporter of China, I hope it evolves in a benign way, but the Chinese leadership today is also positing a different system. Mm-hmm. Right? So we've got to remain strong. And we're never going to be strong if we're divided. So those countries that believe in these values have got to stick together, in my view. I think this is more important than it's ever been. Not for the same reasons about the Second World War, that's a different era. But in the 21st century, if we want to protect our values and protect our interests and protect our influence, we've got to be strong because we're going to have a new power in the East that for the first time in modern history is going to challenge the West in quite a profound way. Now, in challenging it, doesn't mean to say we end up enemies. We shouldn't be. We should work with each other and where we can partner each other. But when you've got that new reality, stay strong.
And is that something that you believe maybe in the end, the single most important question that countries such as the UK, the US, EU, India, and others have to answer in the coming 5-7 years, that how do you make benefits out of the rise of people, including the East, the Eastern power, the Chinese, and yet are able to ensure that the ideals that we all hold dear remain strong?
Yeah, no, I think this is absolutely critical. I think you're completely right. This is where we need to go. And, this is frankly why India is of such fundamental importance. Primarily to people in India, but for all of us, because a powerful and strong and capable India that is a democracy, this is very, very important for us. And one of the reasons that I want my institute to work much more in India now is because for me, when I'm taking a step back and looking at the world and how it develops, it's going to be very important that it's not just America and China together.
We have worked with the Institute. I remember we had a few scholars who would come down to work with us on a project on countering violent extremism online.
Yeah.
And that's my final question. Even as we think of solutions in the real world, the digital world has its own plans.
Yeah.
How is technology going to change many of our old assumptions on managing the world?
So my theory is that this new technological revolution is akin to the 19th century industrial revolution. It's profound in its implications, and the politicians that understand it, can make sense of it, can access its opportunities and mitigate its risks, they're going to own the politics of the future.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Prime Minister Blair. It was a pleasure speaking to you, and again, thank you for coming down to the Raisina Dialogue. I hope you have a successful India visit. We look forward to many more interactions, and I'm always delighted to meet someone who comes from London, because that's my favorite Indian city. So thank you very much.
Thank you.